In this video, we're going to discuss receptors, the sensory system, and their receptor functioning. Starting with definition, we're going to move on to the classification where we're going to look at the exterior receptors and interior receptors, and then finally on the properties, which include specificity of receptor, adaptation, response to increase in the strength of stimulus, sensory transduction, receptor potential, and law of projection. Definition. Receptors are the sensory nerve endings that terminate in periphery as bare unmyelinated endings or in the form of specialized capsulated structures. Receptors give responses to stimuli. When stimulated, receptors produce a series of impulses which are transmitted through the afferent nerves. Biological transducers, or actually receptors function like a transducer. Transducer is a device which converts one form of energy into another. So the receptors are often defined as the biological transducers which convert the various form of energy stimuli in the environment into the action potential in the nerve fiber. Then we have classification of receptors. Classification, generally receptors are classified into two types. We have exterior receptors and interior receptors. Exterior receptors, as the name said, exterior mean outside. Exterior receptors give response to stimuli arising from the outside of the body. Exterior receptors are divided into three groups, which include your cutaneous receptor, chemoreceptor, and telereceptors. Cutaneous receptors, another name for cutaneous receptors is mechanoreceptors. Receptors situated in the skin are called cutaneous receptor. These receptors are also called mechanoreceptors because of their response to the mechanical stimuli such as your touch, pressure, and pain. Touch and pressure receptors give response to vibration also. Then we have chemoreceptors. Receptors which give response to chemical stimuli are called chemoreceptors. Telereceptors are the receptors that give response to stimuli arising away from the body. These receptors are also called distance receptor. Next classification is your interior receptors. Interior mean inside. Interior receptors are the receptor which give response to stimuli arising within the body or inside the body. Let's look at the example of interior receptors. So number one is visceroreceptors and the other one is proprioceptors. These are both the type of interior receptors. Visceroreceptors are situated in viscera. Different visceroreceptors are listed here. Yes, different visceroreceptors are stretch receptors, baroreceptors, chemoreceptors, or osmoreceptors, which are situated in heart, blood vessels, GIT tract, urinary tract, and brain simultaneously. And then we have proprioceptors. Proprioceptors are receptors which give response to change in the position of the different part of the body. So we have interior receptors. Now two types of interior receptors are visceroreceptor and proprioceptors. What are the, okay, let's look at the figure. For exterior receptor, this is the summary of the exterior receptor. We said that exterior receptors are divided into three groups. You have cutaneous receptor, chemoreceptors, and telereceptors. Chemoreceptors further divided into two parts, which is responsible for your taste in the taste buds and smell in the olfactory receptors, and telereceptors also divided into two parts are responsible for your vision and hearing. Vision includes rods and cones in retina, and hearing is your hair cells in the organ of corti. Then we have cutaneous receptor, which include your touch, pressure, cold, warmth, and pain. Touch, how you feel touch is by the Meissonier capsules and Merkel disc. Pressure, Pacinian capsules are responsible for pressure, cold, Caros and bulb, warmth, Ruffini end organs, and pain is free nerve ending or nociceptors. Receptors of cold and warmth are together known as your thermoreceptors, which mean they control your temperature of the body. Then we have interior receptors. We said interior receptor, they both are divided into two parts, your visceroreceptors and proprioceptors. So proprioceptors will include your muscle spindle, Golgi tendon organ, Pacinian capsules, free nerve ending and hair cells. Muscle spindle are situated in your muscles, Golgi tendon organ situated in tendon, Pacinian capsules are situated in ligament and fascia, nerve ending in the joints, and finally hair cells in the vestibular apparatus. And then we have visuoreceptors, which include your stretch, baroreceptors, chemoreceptors, and osmoreceptors. Let's look at the properties of receptors. Number one property of receptor is specificity of response, also known as Mueller's law. Specificity of a response or Mueller law refers to the response given by a particular type of receptor to a specific situation. For example, pain receptor give response only to pain sensation. Similarly, the temperature receptor give response only to the temperature sensation. In addition, each type of sensation depends upon the part of the brain in which its fibers terminate. Specificity of response is also called the Mueller's doctrine of specific nerve energies. Second type of property is adaptation or sensory adaptation, as we say. Adaptation is decline in the discharge of sensory impulses when a receptor is stimulated continuously with constant strength. It is also called sensory adaptation or desensitization. Depending upon the adaptation time, receptor can be divided into two groups or two types, which are your phasic receptor and tonic receptors. Phasic receptor, which get adapted rapidly, include your touch and pressure receptors are the phasic receptor. Then you have tonic receptors, which adapt slowly. Your muscle spindle, pain receptor, and cold receptors are your tonic receptors. Next property is response to increase in strength of stimuli, or Weber-Fischer's law. During the stimulation of a receptor, if the response given by a receptor is to be doubled, the strength of the stimuli must be increased by 100 times. This phenomena is called Weber-Fischer's law, which states that intensity of response of a receptor is directly proportional to the logarithm increase in the intensity stimuli. So derivation of the Weber-Fischer's law is your R equals K log S, where R stands for intensity of response, your sensation, K is your constant, and S is the intensity of stimulation. Next is sensory transduction. This is another property of receptor. Sensory transduction in a receptor is a process by which the energy or stimulus in the environment is converted into the electrical impulse, your action potential in nerve fiber. Transduction is equal to the conversion of one form of energy into the another. So here we are changing your stimulus energy or your environmental energy into the electrical impulses into the action potential. When a receptor is stimulated, it gives response by sending information about the stimulus to CNS. Series of events occur to carry out this function, such as development of receptor potential in the receptor cells and development of action potential in the sensory nerve. Sensory transduction varies depending upon the type of receptor. For example, the chemoreceptor converts chemical energy into the action potential in the sensory nerve fibers. Touch receptor converts mechanical energy into the action potential in the sensory nerve fiber. Then we have receptor potential. For example, the definition of receptor potential is a non-propagated transmembrane potential difference that develops when a receptor is stimulated. It is also called your generator potential. Receptor potential is short-lived and hence it is called transient receptor potential. Receptor potential is not your action potential. There is a difference between action potential and your receptor potential. It is a graded potential, your receptor potential. It is similar to excitatory postsynaptic potential, your EPSP in synapse, and end plate potential in the neuromuscular junction, and electrotonic potential in the nerve fiber. Okay, so here you can see the in figure 139.4, receptor potential in Pacinian capsules. Receptor potential leads to development of local circuits which spread up to first node within the capsule. It leads to the development of action potential in the first node of fiber. Let's look at the properties of receptor potential. Receptor potential has two important properties. Receptor potential is number one, non-propagated. It is confined within the receptor itself and it does not obey all or none law. So these are the receptor potential properties. Significance of this receptor potential: when a receptor potential is sufficiently strong, it causes development of action potential in the sensory nerve. Mechanism of development of receptor potential. Pacinian capsules are generally used to study the receptor potential because of their large size and anatomical configuration. These capsules can be easily dissected from the mesentery of experimental animal. In the Pacinian capsules, the tip of the nerve fiber is unmyelinated. This unmyelinated nerve tip extend through the capsules as the center core fiber. The concentric layer of the capsule surround the core fiber of the nerve. Pacinian capsules give response to the pressure stimulus. When the pressure stimulus is applied, the Pacinian capsule is compressed. This compression causes elongation and change in shape of the capsules. The change in the shape and capsules of the capsules lead to the deformation of the center core fiber of the capsules. This results in the opening of mechanically gated sodium channel. So the positively charged sodium ion enters the interior of the core fiber. This will produce a mild depolarization, for example in the receptor potential. So here is the schematic diagram showing the development of receptor potential and the generation of action potential in the nerve fiber. Let's see. Starting with the pressure stimulus, there will be a compression of the Pacinian capsules, elongation or the change in shape of the Pacinian capsules. Then we have a deformation of the center core fiber, followed by the opening of mechanically gated sodium channel, entrance of sodium ion into the core fiber, then will development of receptor potential, development of local circuit of the current flow, spread of a local circuit of current flow to the first node of Ranvier in the capsules. Then we have opening of the voltage gated sodium channel in the first node of the Ranvier. Sodium ion will enter and the generation of action potential in the nerve fiber will take place. Next is generation of action potential in the nerve fiber. As we said, the receptor potential causes development of the local circuit of the current flow, which spreads along the unmyelinated part of the nerve fiber within the capsules. When this local circuit of the current reaches the first node of Ranvier within the capsules, it causes an opening of voltage gated sodium channel and entrance of the sodium ion into the nerve fiber. This leads to the development of action potential in the nerve fiber. Lastly, there is a law of projection. This is also a property of receptor. When a sensory pathway from the receptor to the cerebral cortex is stimulated on any particular site along its course, the sensation caused by the stimulus is always felt. Refer to it at the location of the receptor. Irrespective of the site stimulated, this phenomena is known as the law of projection. Two examples of law of projections are: number one, if the somastatic area in the right cerebral cortex which receives sensation from the left hand is stimulated, sensation are felt in left hand and not in the head. So this is the law of projection. Sensation complained by amputated patient in the missing limb or phantom limb is the best example of the law of projection. For example, if a leg has been amputated, the cut end heals with scar formation. The cut end of the nerve fiber are merged within the scar. If the cut end of the sensory fibers are stimulated during the movement of thigh, the patient feel as if the sensation is originating from the non-existent leg. Sometimes the patient feels pain in the non-existent limb. This type of pain is called your phantom limb pain.